Thank you so much. I remember when Tatenda, the younger one, was actually born at the York Hospital, and he was in the NIC ICU, and everybody crossed their fingers hoping he would live. And now look what a talented couple of boys we have here with us. Thank you so much. Well, it's our privilege to be able to have a seminar this afternoon, a Discover Bible School seminar. And you might say, like, what is that? Well, that seminar actually will teach you how to share Jesus with others and give you the basis by which to be able to give some Bible studies. And we do hope that you will come. And Elder Zackerson, if I don't do this justice on what I'm saying for the seminar, please correct me when you come up here. But anyway, Dr. Zackerson has many talents and many skills, but he's been the past director of our Sabbath School Department and Personal Ministries Division of the General Conference. He's also run secondary education school in Honduras, we found out as we were talking together. When I mentioned Honduras, he actually was at a school that was next to the orphanage where we took our youth group to work and so on, and he was the principal there and served for many years there, and he has a son who's down there and works in Honduras too. But his grandson, Eric, is right here. And it's nice to have Eric with us. Eric actually was a chauffeur today and drove Granddad up to the church here today to deliver the message. We're happy to have you here too, Eric. And Elder Zackerson, we thank you for coming here, and we look forward to what you have to say to us this morning in our worship hour. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. Mike, I was interested in that food package you showed here. Those of us with some military background will remember a food thing called C rations, which most of us want to forget. They also fed us something called K rations, which we wish we'd never had to either forget or remember. And in that package was something called Spam, which was highly forgettable for everybody, especially for us Adventists who couldn't eat it. It was interesting to see what they have done with food packages when you need it for a survival kit. I need to ask some apologies right as we begin today. Please forgive me if I shake your hand with my left hand. I had a dislocated finger, and it's not quite back in shape yet. So I got to keep my right hand in my pocket, if you'll forgive me, for it when we go through the door. Long ago and far away, there was a young pastor who was starting a new church. He didn't have very many members, and the ones that he could round up had left their homes. They were kind of displaced persons. They weren't all that interested in even getting a church going. But he managed to convince some of them. They got together and decided to start this little church. He wasn't sure exactly what to say to these people. He wasn't sure how to get their courage back up again. They didn't look very prosperous. They didn't look very happy. And they really didn't know what to do with themselves. And he was standing beside a river one day, and all of a sudden, as he was thinking about this whole situation, he had what we would call a vision. And all of a sudden, an angel from heaven came, took hold of him, and he transported him up to a mountainside. And he had him look out over a valley. This was a valley through which there was a road which was a major trade route of that time. Armies had passed through that valley. Caravans had passed through that valley. All kinds of people were continually coming and going through that particular trade route. He looked out there, and he saw the strangest sight that he had ever seen in his life. And the angel said to him, "What do you see?" He looked out in that valley, and he said, "I see nothing but a bunch of dead bones lying in the valley sun." You can find the chapter in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37. And then the angel said to this young preacher, family members were all in the priesthood, and he said to him, "You know what? Talk to the bones." Well, I'm sure that he kind of looked around to see if there are any church members standing around looking. How often does somebody get up on a hill and talk to dead bones? And he felt kind of embarrassed about the whole thing. And then all of a sudden, this angel asked him a question. He said, "Can these bones live?" Well, that's a stupid question. If somebody asked you that question, what would you say? No, of course not. But since he was talking to an angel, he wasn't quite sure if he ought to say no. So he thought about it a little bit, and he said, "This is the time to be diplomatic." And he turned to the messenger, and he said, "Well, you know." That's a nice way out of it. And the angel said to him, "Speak." He actually used the word prophesy. Got a little worse yet in Ezekiel's mind. "Prophesy to these bones and tell these bones to wake up." Well, Ezekiel, I'm sure, looked around a little bit more, make sure no church members were standing there watching. And he said to these bones, in the words the angel gave him, "Bones, wake up." No, come on. If you and I were standing there, this is ridiculous. To look out a bunch of dry bones on a desert road that have been there maybe for centuries, represented all kinds of people from the past, and all of a sudden he's told to talk to them. Well, what about your next door neighbor? How dry is his bones? H.M.S. Richards, the founder of the Voice of Prophecy, told us a story one time. Some of us that happen to have opportunity to have him train us in many things. Elder Richards said, one time I was holding an evangelistic campaign in a Midwestern town, and a lady came and she said, "I've been coming to your meetings and I'm convinced and I want to be baptized, but my husband is opposed to all of this. Would you come and talk to him?" So Elder Richards said, "I'm not sure I want to do this or not, but anyway." So he said, "Okay, I'll go and talk to him." So he went to the man's home. He went in. The man said, "You're that preacher that's messing up my wife's head, right?" He said, "Well, yeah, we've been presenting these sermons from the scriptures, and, well, you know how you do, and you talk to somebody." And he said, and then, as you do, you try to find something in common. So Elder Richards, he kind of looked around, and he said, "Oh, I see you got a couple of boxing things here and so forth. Are you a sportsman?" The guy looked at him, said, "You ever put on the gloves?" Elder Richard said, "Well, yeah, when I was in college in the dorm, we used to fool around a little bit." And then he said to himself, "I wonder what's going on here." And the guy said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." So they went out to the barn behind the house. And lo and behold, in the barn was a complete boxing ring. And he said to Elder Richards, "You want to go a couple of rounds with me?" Elder Richards said, "Now what do I do?" Yeah, he was a big guy, and he noticed something. He said, "I noticed I probably had a longer reach than his." But he said, "I know what he wanted to do. He wanted to kill me." So Elder Richards said, "Well, what am I going to do?" Okay. So they put on the gloves, got into the ring. And Elder Richards said, "I also noticed that this guy was a heavy smoker. So I figured if maybe I could tire him out, at least he wouldn't kill me." So he said, "We got going." And we went for a round 1 and round 2, and I noticed that he was getting really tired. All I was doing was bicycling around the ring, trying to stay out of his way. And then he said, "I noticed he was really tired, and I happened to see an opening, and I gave him a jab, and he went down." Well, he said, we had made a deal. The guy told me, "If you can knock me down, I'll go to your meetings. If I knock you down, my wife's got to stop going." So the guy got up, and lo and behold, that night he was in the meetings. Before long, he was baptized along with his wife. 30 years later, Elder Richards happened to be going through that same town, and he said, "You know what?" to the King's Heralds that were in the car. "You know what? There's somebody here I want to visit." He stopped at the house, not knowing if they still lived there, knocked on the door, and the same man came to the door. And Elder Richards said, "Do you know who I am?" The guy looked at him and he said, "Oh yeah, you're the preacher who knocked me down." At that time, that man who Elder Richards knocked down was the head elder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in that town. You never know what the Lord is going to do to resurrect a bunch of dry bones. You never know what's going to happen. The simplest little thing can make the difference. So, our young preacher, Ezekiel, now prophesies to the bones. What am I doing standing here talking to a bunch of dry bones when all of a sudden something started to move out in the valley and bones started flying around and bones started coming together, and all of a sudden the valley was full of skeletons. In one of the schools where I taught for many years in Colombia in South America, the biology lab had a skeleton that they used, to demonstrate. It had all kinds of hinges on it and all kinds of stuff that they used to demonstrate bones and stuff. Its name was Oscar, and everybody knew who Oscar was. Of course, some of the guys were continually stealing Oscar and hanging him in some closet in the girls' dorm. And then standing outside to hear the screams when somebody opened their closet door and saw Oscar looking at him. So Ezekiel here now is looking at this valley. Now it's not a bunch of disconnected bones, a bunch of skeletons. Well, I don't know what's worse, a bunch of skeletons or a bunch of bones. And all of a sudden, the same angel says to him, "Ezekiel, can these skeletons live?" And Ezekiel again said, "Lord, only you know. I don't have a clue." And all of a sudden the Lord says, "Speak to the skeletons." And he prophesies again. There was a great wind, the Bible tells us. And the wind came out. It all came together. All of a sudden there were tendons on it. There were muscles. And now you had a whole bunch of people standing there, but they were still dead. And again he prophesied. And this time, as we know, the Holy Spirit went through that valley, and all of a sudden, the bones lived. You never know who can be resurrected. You never know what's going to happen. It doesn't take much. It only takes a touch. A man in Brazil was walking down a dirt road. He had no shoes. He was just walking along on a dirt road when something stuck between his toes. Well, he reached down to pick it up and took it out. It was just a ripped up piece of paper, and all it said on it was free Bible course, and it had an address. Well, he said, something free. Let me see what it is. So he sent it in. Today, he's a good, solid Seventh-day Adventist. Isn't that amazing? Tell you a couple more stories. I want to repeat again this afternoon if you happen to be there at the seminar. A lady in London, England, had a baby grand piano, and one day, I don't know, a key stuck or something, and she opened the lid and noticed that something in there was stuck. She took a piece of paper and folded it up, cardboard, stuck it in there, and the key worked again. Well, later she sold that piano. About 10 years later, she sold it. And the new owners got the piano. They were playing it, and they noticed that one of the keys sounded kind of dead. It worked, but it didn't sound right. So they got a piano tuner in. Piano tuner looked it all over and found this old hunk of cardboard stuck in between someplace inside the piano. So he pulled it out, and he put it down on the table. Fixed the piano. It was beautiful. And he said, you know, your problem was you had this piece of paper stuck in there. After he left, she opened up the paper. It was half of a Voice of Prophecy Bible School enrollment card. All it had on it was that it was an enrollment card, and it said something about free, and it had a telephone number. Called the telephone number, got the Bible lessons, and today she's a Seventh-day Adventist. Is that amazing or what? You never know what's going to happen to a bunch of dry bones. All it takes is a touch, a little thing that may get into somebody's hand, an enrollment card that we'll hear about this afternoon, some kind of a thing that gets in somebody's hand, and they start taking a course. You know, I worked out in the Caribbean islands for a while. Out in the islands, we always visited Voice of Prophecy enrollees. And we would visit home after home after home, find all kinds, probably about 90% of all the people who joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church on the islands where I worked had done so because they were students of the Voice of Prophecy. It just takes a touch like that to get it into somebody's hands in a very simple way. You never know what can happen. When people get something, they start studying it and they start to read it. So Ezekiel is totally amazed at what's going on here, that this bunch of dry bones could live, be resurrected, have breath again. And Ellen White, making a comment on this chapter, says, you and I, as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, are looking out on a world that's represented as dry bones. But those bones, through the power of the Holy Spirit, can live. All I need is a touch. Let me tell you one more story. In a land far away, a man retired from the army, and he decided to start a little factory where in those days the big thing was bicycles. So he started a small factory and sales store selling bicycles. He was a member of the Salvation Army at the time, and the Salvation Army, as you know, is always helping people. That's their whole thing. And there was this homeless person, a bum he called him, who came around periodically asking for a handout. Well, this particular factory owner, that's what he did. He liked to help people. So he'd always give him a little something, and before long, the guy would be back again. One day, that same guy showed up, and he had with him an old beat-up book, no cover. It was all stained. He'd pulled it out of the garbage somewhere. And he said, you always help me. He said this to the owner. And I wanted to bring you a present. So I brought you this book. Well, the owner looked at that book and he said, what do I want with an old garbage-stained book with no cover on it? But so he wouldn't hurt the man's feelings, he took the book, went into the storeroom, someplace in his little factory, put it up on a shelf and forgot all about it. One day, sometime later, he was looking for some spare parts or something, and he went up to that shelf and he pulled the book out. And the book flopped open to a page that said, "What day is the Sabbath?" And it said on the page, the seventh day is the Sabbath. It caught his eye. He said, "That's ridiculous." He said, "The Bible doesn't say that." So he went and got his Bible, because every Sunday he went to church faithfully, went and got his Bible, opened it up to the very text that was in that old garbage-stained book. And lo and behold, the Bible said the very same thing. So wait a minute, this is not right. So he read the rest of those garbage-stained pages, and he said, "You know what? What this book says is right. Me and my family, we got to keep Sabbath, not Sunday." So he began keeping Sabbath in his house. He didn't know about anybody else anywhere. And he told his oldest son, who was also in the army, about it, and he read it, and he said, "You know what? That's right." So he resigned from the army, went to work for his dad in the bicycle shop, and one day somebody came by. They were selling books. And they said, "Well, here's an interesting book you might be interested in. Has all kinds of Bible questions and answers in it." The guy said, "Okay, what does it say about the Sabbath?" And the book salesman said, "Isn't that interesting you would ask? It says here on page so-and-so," and the Bible, the factory owner looked at that page, and he said, "Wait a minute." And he went and got his old garbage-stained book, and he said, "Hey, that's the same book. Who publishes this book?" He said, "Well, it's a church called the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Never heard of it." "Well," he said, "there's one right down here around the corner, not too far away. I'll be glad to come get you on Sabbath morning, and you can go there." So lo and behold, with his family, this man now goes on Sabbath morning to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and 3-4 generations of Seventh-day Adventists have resulted. Is that amazing or what? From a garbage-stained book. You never know what's going to happen. I happen to know that story was true because the factory owner happened to be my grandpa. And because of that book, well, you got at least a couple, 3 generations sitting here this morning. Okay, as a reason. You never know how the Lord is going to work. So brothers and sisters, look, this afternoon we're just going to study some ideas of how you can actually develop a ministry in this church or your church, wherever you're from, that will actually get to people you'd probably never touched before. And you just see the miracles of what happens as a result on the whole thing. See, so Ezekiel now looks at that valley and he sees living people where he saw only dry bones. So who do you see? when you look out there on the street, when you look at your neighbor, when you see somebody else, the person you talk to in the market, whoever it may be, whatever the personal contact is, what do you see out there? Is it just a dry bone, or is it a person completely changed through the power of the Holy Spirit because you put something in their hand that made the difference? Think about it. Let's all dedicate ourselves to doing that for the Lord.